Chapter 1. The chains that bind, the silver chains burned like hellfire against Alara's wrists. She'd stopped screaming hours ago, maybe days. Time had lost all meaning in the darkness of the pack's holding cell. The metal seared into her skin with each shallow breath, and she could smell the acrid scent of her own flesh charring beneath the enchanted bonds. They wanted her weak, compliant, broken before he arrived. The Alpha. King was coming to kill her. That's what Maven had whispered through the bars last night. Her former friend's eyes gleaming with something that looked like triumph. Cale Ashford doesn't show mercy to Oathbreakers. Alara, especially not human ones who seduce pack members and steal sacred artifacts. Alara had tried to protest, but Maven had already disappeared into the shadows. Her laughter echoing off the stone walls. I didn't steal anything. I didn't seduce anyone, but the truth didn't matter when the Silver Pine pack had already decided she was guilty. Alara pressed her forehead against the cold stone wall, trying to remember how she'd ended up here. 6 months ago, she'd been a nobody, a waitress at Murphy's Diner in the human settlement on the outskirts of Silver Pine territory. She'd served coffee and pie to truckers and locals, saved every penny, dreamed of saving enough to move somewhere warm where winter didn't claw at your bones for 8 months of the year. Then Declan had walked into her life with his easy smile and storm gray eyes. He'd been kind, attentive. He'd made her feel seen for the first time since her mother died. When he told her about the shifters, about his wolf, she'd been terrified, then fascinated. He had introduced her to the pack slowly, carefully, and for a few precious weeks. She'd felt like she belonged somewhere. She should have known. It was too good to be true. The memory of that night 3 weeks ago still burned. Declan's face pale with fear as pack enforcers dragged her from his cabin. The Silver Pine Beta, Marcus, holding up a silver amulet, ancient and glowing faintly, claiming he'd found it hidden among her things. The council's cold eyes as they pronounced her guilty of theft and seduction, crimes punishable by death under pack law. Declan had said nothing, done nothing, just watched as they took her. Now she waited for an executioner in the form of a king. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs made her muscles tense. Alara forced herself to straighten despite the agony radiating from her wrists. She wouldn't die cowering. If these monsters wanted to take her life for crimes she didn't commit, she'd at least look them in the eye. The door swung open with a groan of old hinges. The man who stepped into her cell stole the breath from her lungs. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway. Dark hair fell just past his collar, slightly disheveled as though he'd been running. But it was his eyes that captured her, molten gold, burning with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. Power radiated from him like heat from a flame, ancient and absolute. This was an alpha. The Alpha. Cale Ashford studied her with those impossible eyes, and Alara felt pinned in place like a butterfly on a collector's board. His expression was unreadable, carved from granite and shadow, but something flickered in his gaze as it traveled over her face, down to the silver chains, then back up to meet her defiant stare. "You're the human," he said. His voice was deep, rough, like stone grinding against stone. "I'm Alara Thorne," she corrected, lifting her chin. "And I'm innocent." Something that might have been surprise crossed his features. The guilty always claim innocence, and the innocent are often condemned anyway. Her voice shook, but she held his gaze. "So which am I to you, Alpha King? Does it even matter?" Cale moved closer, each step measured and predatory. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she refused to retreat. When he stopped just inches away, she could feel the heat of him. Smell cedar and smoke and something wild that made her evolve less human instincts. Scream of danger and something else she didn't want to name. He reached out, and she flinched despite herself. But his fingers didn't strike her. Instead, they ghosted along the silver chains at her wrists, barely touching. His eyes flashed pure gold, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "Who did this to you?" The question came out sharp, almost angry. Alara blinked, confused. "Your pack. The Silver Pine Enforcers. Isn't that why you're here? To finish the job?" "I came to investigate a theft." Kale's jaw clenched. "I came because Marcus Silverpine claimed a human had stolen the Moonstone amulet and needed to be executed under pack law." His fingers finally touched the chains, and Alara gasped as the burning sensation intensified for a moment before suddenly, impossibly, vanishing. The chains fell away. Alara's legs nearly gave out as the relief hit her. She caught herself against the wall, staring at the raw, blistered skin of her wrists. Kale caught her elbow, steadying her, and the contact sent electricity racing up her arm. "These chains are outlawed," he said quietly, his voice deadly calm. "They were banned 40 years ago after the treaty. They're designed to torture, not restrain." His eyes met hers again, and this time she saw something burning there that made her breath catch. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. Why?" The word came out as a whisper. "Why would you believe me?" Kale's hand was still on her elbow, warm and solid and somehow anchor-like in a world that had been spinning out of control for weeks. He studied her face as though searching for something, and when he spoke, his voice had dropped to something almost gentle. "Because I can smell lies, Alara Thorne. Every shifter can." His thumb brushed almost unconsciously against her skin. "And you haven't told me a single one." The door burst open behind them. Marcus Silverpine stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 enforcers. The beta's face was flushed with barely concealed fury. "Alpha King, I must protest. The prisoner is dangerous, and the prisoner is unchained and under my protection as of this moment," Kale interrupted, his voice dropping into a tone that made even Alara's human spine straighten with instinctive submission. "The same cannot be said for whoever authorized the use of torture chains in my territory." Marcus paled. "My lord, I assure you, we were only following protocol, outlawed protocol." Kale turned to face the beta fully, and Alara realized she could see his wolf now, just beneath the surface, barely leashed. "Assemble your council. I want every member of your pack leadership in the Great Hall within the hour." His eyes narrowed. "And someone find Declan Silverpine. I have questions about how his human lover ended up in chains." The beta's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Finally, he managed, "Yes, Alpha King." As Marcus retreated, Kale turned back to Alara. The fury had banked in his eyes, replaced by something more complex. "Can you walk?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." He offered his arm, a surprisingly courtly gesture. "You're coming with me." "And Alara?" He waited until she met his eyes. "Whatever happened here, whatever they've accused you of, I will uncover the truth." "That's a promise." Alara took his arm, her burned wrists throbbing, her mind reeling. The Alpha King who was supposed to execute her was instead promising her protection. She didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified as they climbed the stairs together, leaving the darkness of her cell behind. One thought echoed through her mind. Everything is about to change. She had no idea how right she was. Chapter 2. The Council of Lies. The great hall of Silverpine Manor smelled like old wood, smoke, and fear. Alara stood beside Kale at the head of the long oak table, acutely aware of every eye in the room fixed on her. The council members had assembled too quickly, as though they'd been waiting nearby. 12 faces ranging from hostile to carefully blank watched her like wolves circling wounded prey. Marcus Silverpine sat at the opposite end, his expression a mask of righteous indignation. To his left was Maven, her former friend, whose lips curved into the faintest smirk. And there, near the back, looking anywhere but at her Declan, Alara's chest tightened. He looked thinner than she remembered, shadows under his eyes, his usual confidence dimmed. For one desperate moment, she wanted to believe he'd been forced into silence, that he'd fought for her somehow. Then he finally met her gaze, and she saw only guilt, not remorse, not love, just the uncomfortable guilt of someone who'd chosen the easier path. Let's begin. Cale's voice cut through the room like a blade. He hadn't relaxed his posture for even a moment. He stood like what he was, a king in enemy territory. Marcus Silverpine, you summoned me here with claims of theft and betrayal. You stated that this human, he gestured to Alara without looking away from the beta, stole the Moonstone amulet, a sacred artifact of your pack. That's correct. Alpha King. Marcus stood, his shoulders back. We discovered the amulet hidden among her possessions 3 weeks ago. The evidence was irrefutable. Show me. Marcus gestured to one of the enforcers, who brought forward a wooden box. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was the amulet, a silver crescent moon with a pearl at its center, glowing with a soft, ethereal light. Cale studied it for a long moment. And where exactly did you find this? In her cabin, hidden beneath the floorboards. I didn't have a cabin, Alara said, her voice stronger than she felt. I lived above Murphy's diner in the human settlement. She stayed frequently at Declan's cabin. Maven interrupted smoothly, standing now too. Everyone knew they were lovers. She had access to everything. Alara's face burned. That's not we weren't. Is this true, Declan? Cale's attention shifted to the younger Wolf, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Was Alara your lover? The silence stretched like taffy. We were seeing each other, Declan finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But I never thought I didn't know about the amulet until they found it. Liar. The word escaped Alara before she could stop it. Heads turned, eyes widened. She was supposed to be meek, supposed to accept her fate, but something hot and furious was building in her chest. You told me yourself that the amulet was missing. You said the council was searching for it. That was 2 weeks before they arrested me. Declan's face went white. Is that so? Cale's voice had gone dangerously soft. Declan, did you discuss the missing amulet with Alara before the council discovered it? I might have mentioned. He told me everything. Alara pushed forward, her hands trembling but her voice steady. He said it had been missing for a month. He was worried because it was his responsibility to guard it. He's the pack's historian, the keeper of artifacts. She turned to face him fully now, ignoring the warning growl from one of the enforcers. You were terrified you'd be blamed, Declan? You said you'd searched everywhere. She's twisting my words, Declan said desperately, looking at Marcus. Beta, I never enough. Cale's single word silenced the room. He moved around the table with predatory grace, stopping directly in front of Declan. Look at me. Declan raised his eyes reluctantly. Did you tell Alara about the missing amulet before the council knew it was gone? The compulsion in Cale's voice was undeniable ancient alpha authority that no wolf could resist. Alara felt it even as a human, the weight of command that pressed down like a physical force. Yes, Declan whispered. Maven shot to her feet. That proves nothing. He confided in her, and she used that information to what? Cale turned his burning gaze on Maven. To steal an artifact she could never sell, never use, never escape with. She's human. She has no pack to run to, no resources, no way to leave Silverpine territory without being caught immediately. He gestured to Alara. Look at her. Does she look like a master thief? Or does she look like someone who was convenient to blame? The silence that followed was deafening. With respect, Alpha King, Marcus said carefully. Human or not, the evidence was found in locations she had access to. Perhaps she was working with someone? Perhaps you should tell me why a human woman accused of theft was held in chains that have been outlawed for 4 decades. Kale's voice dropped to a growl that raised the hair on Alara's arms. Perhaps you should explain why those particular chains were even in your possession when owning them as grounds for pact dissolution under the treaty. Marcus's composure cracked. We were following tradition, old ways that violate the treaty I personally negotiated. Kale took a step forward. That treaty protects humans in shifter territory. It guarantees them due process, fair treatment, protection from torture. Another step. You didn't summon me to conduct an execution, Marcus. You summoned me to make your crime legitimate. You wanted an Alpha King seal on murder. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. We would never, Maven started. But Kale silenced her with a look. Here's what's going to happen. Kale's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Alara Thorne is under my protection until this matter is resolved. She will stay at the King's Lodge on neutral ground. I will conduct my own investigation. He turned to face the entire council. And if I find that she was framed, if I discover that anyone in this room conspired to blame an innocent woman there, will be consequences that make execution look merciful. Alara's knees went. Weak. Protection. Investigation. For the first time in 3 weeks. She felt like she could breathe. You can't do this, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its certainty. This is pact business. Internal affairs. You made it my business when you requested my presence for an execution. Kale's smile was all teeth. You invoked the Alpha King's authority. Now you have it. He placed a hand on Alara's lower back, warm, steady, grounding. We're leaving. Alara needs medical attention and rest. As they moved toward the door, Alara heard Maven's whispered hiss. This isn't over. Kale heard it too. He paused, turned his head just enough to pin Maven with those gold eyes. No, he agreed quietly. It's not. Outside, the cool night air hit Alara like a blessing. Her legs finally gave out, and she would have fallen if Kale hadn't caught her, his arm around her waist holding her upright. Easy, he murmured, and the gentleness in his voice nearly broke her. I've got you. Why are you helping me? The question escaped as a whisper. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Kale was quiet for a moment, his arms still supporting her weight. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something she couldn't name. Because I know what it's like to be condemned for something you didn't do. Because I can smell the truth on you like perfume. He paused. And because the moment I walked into that cell and saw you in those chains. He didn't finish, but Alara felt his hand tighten slightly on her waist. What? She whispered. Kale met her eyes, and in the moonlight, his looked more wolf than human. Everything I thought I knew about fate started to make sense. Before Alara could process those words, he was guiding her toward a black SUV, leaving her to wonder what the Alpha King could possibly mean, and why her heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Chapter 3. Wounds that show the King's Lodge sat at the edge of Silverpine territory, where packlands met the wild forest beyond. It was smaller than Alara expected, more cabin than castle, built of dark wood and stone, with wide windows that reflected the moonlight, isolated, private, safe, or at least, that's what she told herself as Kale led her inside. The interior was surprisingly warm. A fire already crackled in the stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across leather furniture and exposed beam ceilings. Someone had prepared for their arrival, though Alara hadn't seen another soul. Sit, Kale instructed, guiding her to the couch near the fire. His hand lingered on her shoulder for a moment before he pulled away. and Alara felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. She watched as he moved through the space with easy familiarity, pulling supplies from a cabinet, bandages, ointments, a basin that he filled with water from the kitchen. When he returned and knelt before her, setting the supplies on the coffee table, Alara's breath caught Dot and Alpha King on his knees. For her, "Give me your hands," he said quietly. Alara hesitated, suddenly self-conscious about the raw, blistered mess of her wrists. In the cell's darkness, she hadn't seen the full extent of the damage. Now, in the firelight, the burns looked angry and infected. The skin blackened in places where the silver had burned deepest. "They're hideous," she whispered. Kale's jaw tightened. "They're proof of what was done to you?" "There's nothing hideous about survival." His gold eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. "Your hands, Alara?" She extended them slowly, trembling. Kale cradled them in his palms with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone so powerful. His hands were large, calloused, warm against her damaged skin. He studied the burns for a long moment, something dark and furious flickering across his features. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "Everything already hurts." His lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Fair point." He dipped a cloth into the water and began cleaning the wounds with careful precision. Alara bit her lip against the sting, determined not to make a sound. But when the cloth touched a particularly deep burn, she couldn't suppress a sharp intake of breath. Kale froze. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault." The words came out more bitter than she intended. "You're not the one who put me in chains." "No, but my laws failed to protect you." He resumed his work, even more carefully now. "The treaty was supposed to prevent this. After the wars, after everything we lost, I thought we'd moved beyond torture and false accusations." His voice dropped. "I was wrong." There was something in his tone, old pain, old regret. Alara found herself studying his face in the firelight, really looking at him for the first time. He was devastatingly handsome, but it was the small details that caught her attention. The faint scar along his jaw, the tension he carried in his shoulders, the way his brow furrowed as he tended her wounds, as though nothing else in the world mattered. "How old are you?" she asked suddenly. He glanced up, surprised. "Why do you ask?" "You talk about the wars like you remember them, but the Shifter Human Wars ended 70 years ago." She paused. "Unless time works differently for alpha wolves." Something shifted in his expression, weariness, maybe, or calculation. "Time works the same, but lifespans don't." He returned his attention to her wrists, applying a salve that immediately soothed the burning. "Pure-blooded alphas can live for centuries." "I'm older than I look." "How much older?" "Old enough to have made more mistakes than I care to count." He began wrapping her wrists with clean bandages, his movements practiced and sure. "Old enough to know that some pack leaders never change, no matter how many treaties we sign." Alara absorbed this, her mind reeling. Centuries. He'd lived for centuries. The weight of that existence, the loneliness of it, suddenly made the shadows in his eyes make sense. "That sounds exhausting," she said softly, Kale's hands stilled on her wrists. He looked up at her, and for a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "It is," he admitted. "It's watching everyone you care about age and die while you remain. It's making decisions that affect generations, knowing you'll live to see the consequences. It's..." He stopped himself, seeming to realize he'd said too much. "Lonely," Alara finished for him. Their eyes met and held. The air between them felt charged, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. "Yes," Kale said quietly. "Lonely." Alara's heart hammered in her chest. She should pull away, should remember that this man was an Alpha King, a creature of legend and power, someone so far beyond her reach it was laughable. but his hands were still cradling her bandaged wrists, and he was looking at her like she was the only real thing in a world of shadows. "Thank you," she whispered, "for the bandages, for believing me, for don't thank me yet." Kale released her hand slowly, reluctantly, and stood. "Tomorrow the real investigation begins. I'll need to interview pack members, examine evidence, probably make enemies of half the Silver Pine Council." He ran a hand through his dark hair, and Alara noticed how tired he looked. "They won't make this easy. Will they hurt you?" He turned back to her, eyebrows raised. "Worried about me? You're protecting me. That makes you a target too." Alara stood, wobbling slightly. Kale was at her side instantly, studying her. "What if they try something? Let them try." There was no arrogance in his voice, just simple fact. "I'm the Alpha King, Alara. I've survived assassination attempts, pack wars, and challengers who thought they could take my crown. A corrupt beta and his scheming council don't scare me." "What does scare you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Kale stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Failing someone who needs my protection, again." The pain in those words was palpable. Alara wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to understand the grief she heard beneath his carefully controlled exterior. But before she could form the question, Kale stepped back, putting professional distance between them. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the left. There are clothes in the dresser. They should fit well enough. You need rest." He moved toward the front door. "I'll be outside." "No one gets past me. Wait." Alara caught his arm, and the contact sent that now familiar electricity racing through her. "Where will you sleep?" "I don't sleep much." He glanced down at where her hand touched his arm, and something flickered in his eyes. "And when I do, I prefer Wolf form. I'll patrol the perimeter, make sure we're not disturbed." "You're going to stand guard?" "All night. I told you you're under my protection now." He covered her hand with his own, just for a moment, the gesture achingly tender. "That's not a responsibility I take lightly, Alara. Nothing will hurt you while I breathe. I promise you that." The conviction in his voice made her chest tighten. No one had ever looked at her the way he was looking at her now, like she was precious, like she mattered, like her safety was worth an Alpha King's vigil. "Kale," she said softly, not even sure what she wanted to say, only knowing she wasn't ready for him to leave. He seemed to understand. His hand squeezed hers gently before letting go. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be difficult." He paused at the door, his back to her. "And Alara, if you need anything at all, just call for me. I'll hear you." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Alara alone with the fire and the weight of everything that had happened. She climbed the stairs slowly, her body aching and her mind spinning. In the bedroom, she found exactly what he'd promised: comfortable clothes, a soft bed, safety. But as she lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, Alara couldn't stop thinking about the man patrolling outside. The lonely Alpha King who'd lived for centuries. The powerful shifter who'd knelt before her to tend her wounds. The stranger who looked at her like fate itself had brought them together. What does it mean? She wondered. This connection, this pull between us. Outside, a wolf's howl echoed through the night deep, haunting, protective, and Alara realized with startling clarity that she felt safer than she had in months, even if she didn't understand why. Chapter 4. Secrets in Daylight. Morning came. Too soon and not soon enough. Elara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For one disorienting moment, she forgot where she was, then the bandages on her wrists and the dull ache in her bones reminded her of everything. The cell, the chains, The counseled at Kale. She dressed quickly in the clothes he'd left dark. Jeans that fit surprisingly well, and a soft gray sweater that smelled faintly of cedar. Someone had thought of everything, down to new socks and boots by the bedroom door. When she descended the stairs, she found Kale standing by the window, backlit by morning sun, a phone pressed to his ear. He'd changed clothes too, now wearing dark tactical pants and a black Henley that did nothing to hide the powerful build beneath. His hair was damp, as though he'd recently showered. He must have come inside at some point. The thought of him watching over her all night made something warm unfurl in her chest. "I don't care what Marcus claims," Kale was saying, his voice hard. "I want the original evidence logs, not copies. And I want the name of every enforcer who had access to that holding cell." A pause. "No, Elena, I'm not asking. That's an order." He hung up and turned, immediately noticing Alara on the stairs. His expression softened fractionally. "You're awake. How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck." She attempted a smile. "But alive. Thanks to you. Coffee?" He gestured to the kitchen, where a full pot waited. "Please." They moved into the kitchen together, and Alara was struck by how domestic it felt, the two of them in comfortable silence as Kale poured her coffee and she leaned against the counter. Like they'd done this 1,000 times before instead of having just met yesterday. "That was Elena Blackwood on the phone," Kale said, handing her a mug. "My second in command. She's been pulling records from Silver Pine's archives." He leaned against the opposite counter, his own mug cradled in his hands. "The evidence logs are interesting." "Interesting how?" "The official report states the amulet was found beneath the floorboards in Declan's cabin during a routine inspection." Kale's eyes narrowed. "But there was no routine inspection scheduled. And the enforcer who supposedly found it? He was off duty that day, 200 miles away at his sister's wedding." Alara's heart stuttered. "So someone falsified the report?" "Not just falsified. They were sloppy about it." Kale took a sip of his coffee, his gaze never leaving her face. "Either they didn't think anyone would check, or they were in a hurry." "The question is why? Why frame me, you mean?" Alara set her mug down, her hands trembling slightly. "I've been asking myself that for 3 weeks. I'm nobody. Just a human waitress who happened to fall for the wrong wolf." "You're not nobody." Kale's voice was quiet but firm. "And I'm starting to think you being human is exactly why they chose you. I don't understand." He pushed off the counter and moved closer, and Alara's pulse quickened. Even in the morning light, there was something undeniably magnetic about him, the way he moved. The intensity of his focus, the barely leashed power that radiated from every gesture. Under the treaty, crimes involving humans require outside investigation, Kale explained. Pack law has jurisdiction, but only if certain protocols are followed. Due process. Fair trial. No torture. His jaw clenched. They violated every protocol, Alara. They imprisoned you illegally, tortured you with outlawed chains, and tried to execute you without proper investigation. They wanted you to do it, Alara realized, the pieces clicking into place. They wanted the Alpha King to execute me so no one would question it. So it would all be over quickly. Exactly. Kale's eyes flashed gold for just a moment, but they miscalculated. They assumed I'd take Marcus at his word, carry out the sentence, and leave. They didn't expect me to ask questions. Why did you? The words came out as a whisper. Most alphas would have just finished it. Kale was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to his coffee. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. 100 years ago, I executed a man for treason. He swore he was innocent, that he'd been framed by his beta who wanted his mate. Kale's hands tightened on his mug. I didn't listen. I was young, arrogant, certain of my own judgment. I killed him. Alara's breath caught, and 2 months later, the beta confessed on his deathbed. The man I executed had been innocent. His mate threw herself from the cliffs in grief. Cale finally looked up, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. I swore I would never make that mistake again. That I would question everything, trust nothing but what I could verify myself. Without thinking, Alara reached out and touched his arm. That wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known. I should have known. His voice was barely audible. I should have investigated. Instead, I let my pride and my certainty blind me. He covered her hand with his own. So when I walked into that cell and saw you in chains, saw the truth written all over your face, I couldn't ignore it. I wouldn't. They stood there, hands touching, the morning sun painting golden stripes across the kitchen floor. Alara could feel his pulse beneath her fingertips, steady and strong, and she wondered if he could feel hers racing. I'm sorry, she said softly, for what happened to them, for what you've carried. Don't apologize for my failures. But his hand squeezed hers gently. Just help me make sure no one else suffers for them. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Cale released her hand and moved with fluid grace toward the entrance, his entire demeanor shifting into something alert and dangerous. He opened the door to reveal a woman in her mid-30s, tall and athletic with warm brown skin and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore tactical gear similar to Cale's and carried a leather satchel over her shoulder. Elena, Cale greeted. That was fast. You said it was urgent. Elena's gaze slid past him to Alara, and something like sympathy crossed her features. You must be Alara Thorne. I'm Elena Blackwood, the Alpha King II. Nice to meet you, Alara managed, feeling suddenly self-conscious in her borrowed clothes with her bandaged wrists. Elena brought the evidence files, Cale said, stepping aside to let her enter. And hopefully some answers. Elena set the satchel on the dining table and began pulling out folders and documents. Answers, yes. Good news, not so much. She spread papers across the table. The Moonstone amulet went missing 6 weeks ago, not 4 like Declan claimed. And it wasn't just any artifact, it's a bloodline token. It can only be handled by direct descendants of the Silverpine founding family. Alara moved closer to the table. What does that mean? It means, Elena said carefully, that if you'd actually stolen it, you wouldn't have been able to touch it without severe magical backlash. Burns, sickness, possibly death, depending on your intent. She looked at Alara's bandaged wrists. Those chains hurt you. But did you ever touch the amulet itself? Never. Alara shook her head. I didn't even know it existed until they accused me. Then you physically couldn't have stolen it? Elena looked at Cale. Which means whoever did take it had Silverpine blood. And whoever framed Alara knew about the bloodline restriction and counted on no one checking. The implications settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Declan, Alara breathed. He's Silverpine bloodline. He could have touched it, but why would he steal his own pack's artifact? Cale mused, his mind clearly working through possibilities. And why frame you? Maybe he wasn't working alone, Elena suggested. The evidence tampering required access to official records. That's beta-level clearance or higher. Cale's expression darkened. Marcus, it's possible, though I can't figure out the endgame. Elena tapped one of the documents. The amulet is valuable, yes, but more as a symbol than anything else. It doesn't grant power or magic, just marks legitimate Silverpine leadership. Unless, Cale said slowly, someone wanted to discredit the current leadership, or needed proof of bloodline for some other purpose. Alara's head spun trying to follow the political implications. But one thing was crystal clear. She'd been caught in the middle of something much bigger than a simple theft. What do we do now? She asked. Cale looked at her, and despite everything, the conspiracy, the danger, The uncertainty, his gaze was steady and sure. Now we go back to Silver Pine Manor. We confront Declan directly, and we don't leave until we have the truth. They'll be hostile, Elena warned. Marcus won't let you question pack members without a fight. Then we fight. Kale's voice carried absolute certainty. I'm done playing by their rules. He turned to Alara, and she saw the question in his eyes before he spoke it. This will be dangerous. If you want to stay here where it's safe, no. Alara surprised herself with the force of her response. I'm coming with you. This is my life they destroyed. I deserve to face them. Something that might have been pride flickered across Kale's features. Then we go together. As they prepared to leave, Alara caught her reflection in the hallway mirror-bandaged wrists, borrowed clothes, dark circles under her eyes. She looked like exactly what she was, someone who'd survived hell. But standing beside Kale, with Elena at their backs, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. She felt like she might actually win. Chapter 5, Confrontation and Confessions, the drive back to Silver Pine Manor. Felt like riding toward a storm. Alara sat in the passenger seat of Kale's SUV, watching the forest blur past while Elena followed in a separate vehicle. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable, charged with anticipation and something else Alara couldn't quite name. You're afraid, Kale said quietly, not taking his eyes off the road. Terrified, she admitted. But I'm also angry. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. His hand moved from the gear shift to briefly cover hers where it rested on her knee. The contact was brief but electric. Fear and anger can coexist. Use them both. Is that what you do? He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering in those gold eyes. I've had centuries to learn how to channel emotion into action. You're doing remarkably well for someone who's only had 3 weeks of hell. I had a good teacher last night. The words came out softer than she intended. Thank you. For everything. Kale's jaw tightened, and he returned his hand to the wheel. Don't thank me until this is over. Until you're truly safe. I feel safe with you. The confession slipped out before she could stop it, and Alara felt her cheeks heat. I mean, that probably sounds stupid given everything. It doesn't sound stupid. Kale's voice was rough. It sounds like trust, which is more than I deserve after knowing you less than a day. Sometimes you just know, Alara said, thinking about how right it felt to stand beside him, how natural his presence had become in such a short time. When something is real, she felt his gaze on her, intense and searching, but when she turned to meet it, he'd already looked away. We're here. Silver Pine Manor loomed before them, all stone and dark windows. Several vehicles were already parked in the circular drive. The council had been summoned again. Kale had made sure of it. Elena pulled up beside them as they exited the SUV. Ready for this? She asked, her hand resting casually on the weapon at her hip. No, Alara said honestly. But let's do it anyway. Kale moved to her side, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Stay near me. If anything happens, I know. You'll protect me. Alara looked up at him, and something passed between them, a promise, a connection. Something that felt suspiciously like fate wrapping invisible threads around them both. But I can also protect myself if I have to. A smile ghosted across his lips. I'm beginning to see that. They entered the manor together, and Alara felt every eye turn to track her movement. The council had assembled in the great hall again, but this time the atmosphere was different, tense, hostile, desperate. Marcus stood at the head of the table, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Maven hovered near the back, her expression calculating. And Declan wouldn't look at her at all. Alpha King, Marcus said, his tone dripping with false courtesy. This is highly irregular. To summon the council twice in 2 days is my right under the treaty. Kale's voice cut through the room like a blade. Especially when evidence of criminal conspiracy has come to light. The room went very still. I don't know what that human has told you, Marcus began, but I assure you, the human has a name, Alara said, her voice stronger than she felt. And I didn't tell him anything. The evidence speaks for itself. Maven laughed, sharp and brittle. What evidence? You were caught red-handed. Was I? Alara stepped forward, feeling Kale's reassuring presence at her back. Then explain how I supposedly stole an artifact I couldn't physically touch without dying. Explain how the enforcer who found the amulet was 200 miles away at the time. Explain the falsified reports and the illegal chains. Those chains were, Marcus started. Outlawed, Elena interrupted, moving to stand beside Alara. Banned under Section 12 of the treaty. Their possession alone is grounds for pact dissolution. The color drained from Marcus's face. We were following old traditions. You were committing torture, Cale corrected, his voice deadly calm. And you were framing an innocent woman to cover up internal corruption. He turned his gaze to Declan, who seemed to shrink under the weight of it. Time to talk, Declan. The truth this time. I don't know what you mean, Declan whispered. The amulet, Cale said. It went missing 6 weeks ago. You were responsible for guarding it, and you're one of only a handful of wolves in this pack who could touch it without magical backlash. He moved closer, predatory and inevitable. So either you took it or you know who did. Which is it? The silence stretched like taffy. Alara watched Declan's face, saw the war happening behind his eyes, fear battling with guilt, battling with something else she couldn't identify. Tell them, Maven said suddenly, her voice strange. Tell them what you told me, Declan, about how she seduced you, how she convinced you to show her the artifacts. That's not what happened. Declan's voice cracked. Maven, please what? Maven's mask slipped, revealing something ugly underneath. Please let you take all the blame. Please let you destroy everything we worked for. Maven, Marcus's warning came too late. Cale's attention snapped to Maven like a wolf scenting blood. What did you work for, Maven? What's really going on here? Maven's laugh was unhinged now, desperate. You want to know the truth, Alpha King? Fine, the amulet wasn't stolen. It was removed. By those of us who actually understand what Silverpine means. Which is? Elena prompted, new leadership. Maven gestured wildly at Marcus. He's weak. He kowtows to human settlements, dilutes our bloodlines, refuses to expand our territory. The old families wanted change, and the amulet was proof of our right to challenge his authority. So you took it, Cale said slowly. And when Declan discovered it was missing, he panicked, Maven confirmed. Came running to me, terrified he'd be blamed since he was supposed to guard it. So I gave him a solution. Her eyes cut to Alara with pure venom. Blame the human. The outsider. The one no one would question or defend. Alara felt like she'd been punched in the gut. You destroyed my life because it was convenient. You don't belong here, Maven spat. You're human. You should never have been allowed in pack territory in the first place. Declan was weak, distracted by you. I was doing him a favor. A favor? Declan's voice was string-led. You told me if I helped you, Alara would just be expelled from Packlands. You said no one would be hurt. And you believed me because you're a fool? Maven turned to Marcus. Just like you're a fool for thinking the old families would let you lead us into obscurity. Marcus looked like he'd aged a decade. Maven, what have you done? What needed to be done? Maven pulled something from her pocket, a small silver object that caught the light. The Moonstone amulet. The old families are challenging your leadership. Marcus, tonight, and there's nothing the Alpha King can do about it. Internal pack challenges are outside his jurisdiction. Clever, Cale admitted, though his expression was murderous. Frame the human, create chaos, Use that chaos to challenge for leadership, all while keeping your hands technically clean under pack law. We learned from the best, Maven said with a poisonous smile. Alara felt the world tilting. This had never been about her. She'd been collateral damage in a coup, her life destroyed because she was convenient to blame. Declan. Kale's voice was deceptively soft. Did you know about the challenge? No, Declan whispered, staring at Maven with horror. I swear, I panicked. I thought if I went along with blaming Alara, it would all blow over and she'd be safe. I never wanted. His voice broke. I'm sorry. God, Alara, I'm so sorry. Alara looked at the man she'd once thought she loved and felt nothing but pity. Sorry doesn't fix anything. No, Kale agreed. But the truth does. He turned to Marcus. Under the treaty, you have the right to refuse this challenge and request Alpha King mediation. Do you want my help ending this, or do you want to face the old families alone? Marcus met his eyes, and something like relief flooded his features. I request mediation. No. Maven lunged forward, but Elena was faster, restraining her with practiced ease. It's over, Maven, Kale said quietly. Your coup failed, and now you'll face treaty justice for torture, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. As Elena secured Maven and other enforcers moved to restrain the conspirators Maven had named, Kale turned to Alara. His hand found hers, and she realized she was shaking. It's over, he murmured, pulling her close. You're safe now. Alara buried her face against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the solid strength of him. I don't feel safe. I feel broken. Then we'll put you back together. His arms tightened around her, piece by piece, for as long as it takes. And standing in the great hall, surrounded by chaos and justice, Alara realized something terrifying and wonderful. She believed him. Chapter 6. The Weight of Freedom. Hours after the confrontation blurred together in a haze of statements, testimonies, and formal proceedings, Elena coordinated with pack enforcers loyal to Marcus, securing Maven and the other conspirators. Declan sat in a corner looking hollowed out, occasionally meeting Alara's eyes with expressions of desperate remorse that she couldn't bring herself to acknowledge. Through it all, Kale remained a constant presence at her side, a steady anchor in the storm by the time they returned to the King's Lodge. Night had fallen again, exhaustion weighed on Alara like a physical thing. She felt wrung out, emotionally shredded, as though someone had taken everything inside her and rearranged it without asking permission. You should eat something, Kale said as they entered the lodge. His voice was gentle, concerned in a way that made her chest ache. I should feel relieved, Alara said instead, standing in the middle of the living room as though she'd forgotten how to move. I'm vindicated. The truth is out. Maven and the others will face justice. I should feel something. You feel numb? Kale moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. That's normal after trauma. Your mind is protecting you. I don't want protection anymore. The words came out sharper than she intended. I want to feel angry or happy or anything, but there's just this emptiness where everything used to be. Kale was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand. Come with me. He led her through the lodge to a door she hadn't noticed before, one that opened onto a back deck overlooking the forest. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of pine and earth and wild things. Above them, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. When I feel empty, Kale said, still holding her hand, I come out here. I remember that the world is bigger than my pain, that there's beauty even in darkness. Alara looked up at the stars, then at him. In the moonlight, he looked almost ethereal, beautiful, and dangerous, and impossibly kind. How do you do it? Carry so much for so long without breaking? Who says I haven't broken? His thumb traced slow circles on the back of her hand. I've shattered and reformed more times than I can count. That's the curse of a long life. You accumulate damage. The key is learning how to put yourself back together. Will you teach me? The question was barely a whisper. Cale turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek with devastating gentleness. I would teach you anything you wanted to know, Alara Thorne. The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility. Alara's heart hammered as she leaned into his touch, her eyes searching his face. She saw hunger there, carefully restrained, and something deeper, something that looked almost like reverence. Cale, she breathed, not even sure what she was asking for. His jaw clenched. You've been through hell. You're vulnerable, processing trauma. I won't take advantage of that. You're not taking advantage. Alara's hand came up to cover his where it rested against her cheek. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. You barely know me. I know you risked your authority to save me. I know you knelt to tend my wounds. I know you spent the night as a wolf guarding me while I slept. She held his gaze, refusing to look away. I know that when you look at me, I feel seen for the first time in my life. That's enough. It shouldn't be. But his hand trembled slightly against her skin. I'm centuries old, Alara. I've lived lifetimes. I carry ghosts and mistakes, and I'm here now. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Not your past. Not your ghosts. Me. Right here, choosing to trust you despite every reason not to trust anyone. Cale's eyes flashed gold pure wolf, and a low sound rumbled in his chest. You have no idea what you do to me. Then tell me. You make me feel young again. His voice was raw, unguarded. You make me remember what it's like to want something beyond duty and crown and responsibility. When I walked into that cell and saw you, he paused, seeming to wrestle with something. I felt the mate bond snap into place. Alara's breath caught. What? Shifters have destined mates. Soul bonds written into our very nature. His other hand came up to frame her face, cradling her like something precious. I've lived 300 years without feeling it. I thought I was immune, that maybe alphas were too dominant to be bonded. Then I saw you, and everything I thought I knew shattered. A mate bond, Alara whispered, her mind reeling. That's why everything feels so intense. Why I trust you when I shouldn't. Why being near you feels like coming home. The bond can be one-sided. Cale's voice carried warning and hope in equal measure. You're human. You might not feel it the way I do. What you're experiencing could just be gratitude or trauma bonding or... Alara kissed him. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his, cutting off his protests and reasons in careful distance. For a heartbeat, Cale froze, then he was kissing her back with a hunger that stole her breath. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head as he deepened the kiss. And Alara felt like she was falling and flying simultaneously. This was what she'd been missing. This connection, this rightness, this feeling of two pieces sliding perfectly into place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cale rested his forehead against hers. That was either the best or worst decision you've ever made. Best, Alara said firmly. Definitely best. I won't be easy to love. His voice was rough, vulnerable. I'm possessive and protective, and sometimes I disappear into my wolf for days. I have enemies and responsibilities and a kingdom that demands my attention. I won't be easy either. Alara's hands fisted in his shirt. I'm broken and traumatized, and I have no idea how to navigate your world. I'll probably make mistakes and push you away when I'm scared, and he kissed her again, softer this time, achingly tender. Then we'll be difficult together. Alara laughed against his lips, the sound surprised and genuine. Is this insane? Yesterday I was in chains waiting to die. Now I'm kissing an alpha king and talking about meat bombs. Completely insane. Kale pulled back enough to meet her eyes, and she saw the smile playing at his lips. But I've learned that the best things in life usually are. They stood together on the deck, wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Alara felt hope unfurling in her chest. Not the desperate, grasping hope of survival, but something warmer, steadier, the hope of a future. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, Kale said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, we take it one day at a time. You heal. I handle the fallout from Maven's arrest and Marcus's leadership challenge. We figure out what this bond means and what we want from each other, and if your kingdom doesn't approve of a human mate. His arms tightened around her. Then they'll learn to live with disappointment. Because I've waited 300 years for you, Alara Thorne. I'm not giving you up for politics or propriety or anything else. The fierce certainty in his voice made her believe in possibilities she'd never dared imagine. A life beyond survival. A love beyond reason. A future that included this impossible, infuriating, perfect man who looked at her like she hung with stars. Stay with me tonight? The request slipped out before she could second-guess it. Not like that. Just stay. I don't want to be alone. I told you I'd guard you. Kale's voice was gentle. That includes guarding you from nightmares and darkness and the weight of everything you've survived. He guided her back inside, his arms solid around her waist. Come on, let's get you fed and warm, and then not leaving your side. As they moved through the lodge together, Alara realized that the emptiness she'd felt earlier had transformed into something else. Anticipation, hope, connection, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of love. Chapter 7. When dawn breaks differently, Ella woke to warmth and the steady rhythm of breathing that wasn't her own. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was, then memory flooded back. The deck, the confession, the kiss, Kale promising to stay. She was curled against his chest on the couch, a blanket draped over them both. His arm was wrapped protectively around her waist, his other hand loosely holding hers. Even in sleep, he held her like something precious. The morning light painted everything gold, and Alara took the opportunity to simply look at him. In sleep, the careful control he maintained while awake had softened. He looked younger somehow, more at peace, though she could still see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes. 300 years, she thought. He'd lived for 3 centuries, and somehow fate had decided she, a broken human waitress, belonged to him. You're thinking too loud, Kale murmured. His eyes still closed, but a smile playing at his lips. Alara felt her cheeks heat. How do you know I'm thinking at all? Your heart rate changed. Your breathing got shallower. He opened his eyes, and they were soft, unguarded in a way she'd never seen. And I can feel your confusion through the bond. You can feel what I'm feeling? Sometimes, when emotions are strong enough. His thumb traced lazy circles on her hip. Right now you're overwhelmed, uncertain, and happy. Beneath all the fear, that's terrifying. But she didn't pull away. What else can you feel? Kale's expression grew more serious. Everything, eventually. As the bond strengthens, we'll become more attuned to each other. Your emotions, your pain, your joy, I'll feel them all as though they're my own. He paused. It goes both ways. You'll feel mine too. I already do, I think. Alara's free hand came up to rest over his heart. Sometimes when you look at me, I feel this ache, like loneliness and longing mixed together. Something vulnerable flickered across his features. The bond is already taking hold in you. That's rare for humans. Usually it takes months to develop. But you're responding to it naturally, instinctively. Is that good or bad? It's unprecedented. Kale shifted slightly, bringing them closer. And it terrifies me. Why? Because it means you're mine in every way that matters, and I'm yours. His voice dropped. And I've already failed to protect you once. What if I fail again? Alara understood then this powerful ancient alpha was afraid. Not of enemies or challenges or death, but of losing her. Of failing the one person the universe had decided he was meant to protect. You didn't fail me, she said firmly. You saved me, and I'm here alive because of you. You were tortured in chains while I was hundreds of miles away. You couldn't have known. Alara pulled back enough to frame his face with her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Stop carrying guilt that isn't yours. Maven and her conspirators did this. Not you. Kale's jaw clenched. If I'd been more vigilant, more involved in pack politics, then you'd drive yourself insane trying to prevent every possible injustice in every pack under your rule. She softened her voice. You're not omnipotent, Kale. You're just a man. A very old, very powerful, very frustrating man, but still just a man. A surprised laugh escaped him. Just a man? Well, a man who turns into a wolf. But the principle stands. Alara smiled. You can't save everyone, but you saved me. That's enough. Kale studied her face for a long moment, something like wonder in his eyes. Then he kissed her slow and deep and full of promises neither of them had words for yet. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. How did you get so wise? He murmured. Years of serving coffee to truckers and listening to their life advice. The joke fell flat even as she said it, and Alara felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. God, I don't even know what I am anymore. I'm not a waitress. I'm not part of the human world, but I'm not pack either. What am I supposed to do now? Where do I even belong? Here. Kale's arms tightened around her. With me, for as long as you want, and when your kingdom finds out, when other alphas learn their king has bonded with a human. Fear crept into her voice. I've read enough romance novels to know how this goes. Your people will demand you take a proper mate, someone with status and power, and none of that matters. The authority in his voice was absolute. The mate bond isn't a choice, Alara. It's destiny written into our very souls. No alpha can refuse their true mate without destroying themselves. The kingdom will accept you because they have no alternative. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of welcome. Kale's expression softened. Give them time. They'll see what I see, someone brave and strong and possibly stubborn. Someone who stared down an alpha king with silver burns on her wrists and refused to break. A knock at the door interrupted whatever Alara might have said. Kale's entire demeanor shifted instantly from tender mate to lethal alpha in a heartbeat. He moved her carefully aside and stood, positioning himself between her and the door. Who is it? His voice carried command that made even Alara straighten instinctively. Elena, we have a problem. Kale opened the door, and Alara could see the tension in Elena's shoulders before she even spoke. Marcus called an emergency council session. The old families are pushing harder for the leadership challenge, and they're claiming, Elena's eyes flicked to Alara. They're claiming the Alpha King is compromised, that his judgment is clouded by an inappropriate attachment to the human prisoner. I was never a prisoner, Alara said, standing up. I was falsely accused. They're spinning the narrative. Elena looked apologetic. Maven is claiming from her cell that you seduced Declan, then seduced the Alpha King to avoid execution. Some of the older pack members are buying it. Kale's growl was purely wolf. Let them challenge me directly if they question my judgment. That's exactly what they want. Elena stepped inside, closing the door. If you engage in pack politics now, while emotions are high and you're clearly bonded to Alara, they'll use it against you. They'll say you're thinking with your heart instead of your head. I am thinking with my heart. Kale reached back, finding Alara's hand and pulling her to his side. The bond makes that inevitable. But my heart and my head agree. Alara is innocent, and anyone who claims otherwise is either a fool or a liar. I believe you, Elena said. But perception matters. Right now, half the supernatural community is watching to see how you handle this. Some will see a king protecting his mate. Others will see weakness, an alpha compromised by human attachment. Alara felt something cold settle in her stomach. I'm a liability? No. Kale turned to her, fierce and unyielding. You're my mate. There's a difference. Is there? Alara pulled her hand free, stepping back. If being with me costs you your authority, your kingdom, then I'll pay that price gladly. He followed her retreat, closing the distance between them. I told you last night I've waited 300 years for you. I'm not giving you up, even if it destroys everything you've built. Especially then. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his burning gaze. Because without you, what's the point? Another century of loneliness? Another 300 years of duty without joy? I'd rather have one lifetime with you than an eternity without. The declaration hung in the air, raw and absolute. Alara felt tears spill over, overwhelmed by the weight of his certainty, his sacrifice, his impossible devotion to someone he barely knew. That's not fair, she whispered. You can't put that on me. I'm not putting anything on you. I'm making a choice. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips with devastating gentleness. The only question is what you choose. Do you want this bond? Do you want me, despite the complications and consequences? Alara looked up at this ancient, powerful being who'd somehow become her everything in the span of 3 days. She thought about going back to her old life serving coffee, living small, pretending she'd never known what it felt like to be cherished and protected and chosen by fate itself. The thought made her physically ill. I want you, she said, the words coming out fierce and sure. I want this bond and this insanity and whatever comes next. Even if your kingdom hates me, even if I have no idea what I'm doing. Kale's smile was radiant. Then we'll figure it out together. Touching, Elena said dryly from near the door. But we still have to deal with the immediate crisis. The council session is in 3 hours, and they're demanding the Alpha King's presence. Kale's expression hardened. Then they'll get it, and they'll also get my formal declaration of Alara as my bonded mate, with all the rights and protections that entails. That will cause an uproar, Elena warned. Good. Kale's smile was all teeth. Let them rage. The bond is done. Fate has spoken. And anyone who challenges that challenges me directly. As Elena left to make preparations, Alara looked at Kale with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This is really happening. This is really happening. He pulled her close, his arms a fortress around her. Ready to face down an angry council as the Alpha King's mate? Alara thought about the girl she'd been 3 weeks ago, small, scared, alone. Then she thought about who she was becoming, someone brave enough to love an impossible man, strong enough to face impossible odds. No, she admitted. But I'll do it anyway. That's my mate. Kale kissed her once more, deep and claiming. Let's go remind them who makes the rules. Chapter 8. The declaration, the council chamber felt different this time. More crowded, more hostile, more like walking into a den of wolves who'd already decided she was prey. Alara stood beside Kale at the entrance, her hand firmly in his despite every instinct screaming at her to hide. She dressed carefully in clothes Elena had brought dark, slacks and a deep green blouse that brought out her eyes, professional, dignified. Nothing. Like the broken prisoner they'd last seen in chains, but it was the way Kale held himself that truly commanded the room. He radiated authority, power barely leashed, alpha dominance that made even the boldest wolves avert their eyes. His hand in hers was the only gentle thing about him. Alpha King, Marcus began from his seat at the head table, his voice carefully neutral. "Thank you for attending. We have concerns regarding... I know what your concerns are." Kale's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You're concerned that I've let my judgment be compromised, that I've acted inappropriately regarding Alara Thorne." He paused, his gold eyes sweeping the assembled council. "You're correct." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Alara's heart stuttered. What was he doing? "My judgment has been compromised," Kale continued, his voice carrying absolute authority. "From the moment I walked into that cell and found this woman tortured in outlawed chains, my judgment ceased to be objective. Because in that moment, I recognized her for what she is." He turned to Alara, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "My fated mate." The room exploded. Wolves shot to their feet, voices raised in protest and shock. An older woman near the back actually shifted partially, her eyes flashing amber with agitation. Marcus looked like he'd been struck, his face pale with disbelief. "That's impossible." Someone shouted. "She's human." "The mate bond doesn't discriminate by species," Kale replied, his voice somehow carrying over the chaos without rising in volume. "It simply is. And anyone who has studied shifter lore knows that to deny one's true mate is to invite madness and death." "This is convenient timing," Maven's father said, standing with barely restrained rage. His daughter might be in custody, but clearly the family's ambitions hadn't died with her arrest. "Your judgment is questioned, so suddenly you claim this human as your destined mate. Forgive our skepticism, Alpha King. I don't require your forgiveness or your belief." Kale's eyes flashed pure gold. "The bond exists whether you acknowledge it or not. But since you doubt me, allow me to demonstrate." Before Alara could ask what he meant, Kale pulled her close and kissed her deep, possessive, claiming. But it wasn't just a kiss. She felt something ignite between them, a golden thread of energy that pulsed with heat and light, and connection so intense she gasped against his mouth. Every wolf in the room would feel it. Every shifter would recognize it for what it was, the undeniable resonance of a true mate bond, blazing like a beacon in the supernatural frequencies only they could sense. When Kale pulled back, Alara was dizzy, her skin humming with residual energy. The council chamber had gone completely silent. "Still doubt me?" Kale asked, his voice deadly soft. No one answered. "Now that we've established the truth," Kale continued, his arm wrapping protectively around Alara's waist, "let's discuss what happens next. Alara is my bonded mate. She is under my protection, my authority, and my crown. Any threat to her is a threat to me. Any insult to her is an insult to me. And any pack that refuses to recognize her status will find themselves without my support or protection." "You can't mean to make her queen," Marcus said, his voice strangled. "She has no training, no understanding of pack politics, no. She has my bond." Kale's voice dropped to a growl. "That's all the authority she needs. And she'll learn the rest, just as I once did. Or have you forgotten that I wasn't born to rule? That I earned this crown through strength and cunning and centuries of service?" The reminder hung heavy in the air. Kale had united the packs after the wars, had negotiated the treaty, had brought peace to a fractured supernatural world. His authority wasn't inherited, it was forged in blood and sacrifice. What about Silverpine's leadership challenge? Someone called from the back. "With Maven arrested and the amulet recovered, does Marcus remain beta?" "That's for the pack to decide," Kale said. "Under mediation, as Marcus requested. But let me be clear, any challenge must be legitimate, conducted according to pack law and treaty regulations. No more conspiracies. No more torture. No more framing innocent humans to cover internal politics." His eyes found Declan, who sat near the back looking like he wanted to disappear. "Declan Silverpine, you conspired in the false imprisonment and torture of my mate. You watched her suffer and said nothing. Under pack law, that's unforgivable. Declan stood on shaking legs. Alpha King, I was scared. Maven said no one would be hurt, that Alara would just be expelled from territory. I never wanted. Your intentions don't erase your actions. Kale's voice was ice. However, you did eventually tell the truth, which prevented further harm. Therefore, I am offering you a choice: accept permanent exile from Silverpine territory, or face formal trial for conspiracy and torture with the potential consequence of death. The color drained from Declan's face. Exile. Then you have until sundown to leave Packlands. If you're found here after dark, the enforcers have standing orders to detain you for trial. Kale's gaze swept the room. Let that be a lesson. Cowardice and complicity will not be tolerated in my territory. Alara felt something twist in her chest watching Declan, this man she'd once cared for, accept his fate with hollow eyes. But she couldn't find it in herself to feel sorry for him. He'd chosen to save himself at her expense. Now he'd live with that choice. As for the Silverpine Pack, Kale continued, you have 2 weeks to conduct internal review. Determine if Marcus retains your confidence and submit formal reports to the Crown. Elena Blackwood will oversee the process to ensure fairness. He paused. And understand this, I will be watching. This pack has brought shame to shifter justice. Redeem yourselves, or face dissolution. The threat was clear. One more misstep, and Silverpine Pack would cease to exist, its members scattered and integrated into other territories. It was the harshest penalty Kale could levy short of execution. Marcus stood, his shoulders back despite the tremor in his hands. We will earn back your trust, Alpha King, and we welcome your mate to our territory. Offer our deepest apologies for what was done to her. It wasn't entirely sincere, Alara could hear the strain in his voice. But it was acknowledgement, which was more than she'd expected. Alara? Kale turned to her, his voice softening. Do you accept their apology? Every eye turned to her. The council, the pack members, even the enforcers standing guard, all waiting to see what the human would say. The human who somehow held the Alpha King's heart. Alara thought about rage and vengeance, and all the ways she could make them suffer for what they'd done. Then she thought about Kale's words from the night before about breaking and reforming, about carrying damage without letting it destroy you. I accept your apology, she said clearly, but I don't forgive you. Forgiveness will take time, if it comes at all. Right now, I'm choosing to move forward, to heal, to build something better than what came before. She felt Kale's pride through the bond, warm and bright. His hand squeezed hers. Well said. Kale addressed the council one final time. This matter is closed. Alara's name is cleared. Maven and her co-conspirators will face trial, and Silverpine will undergo restructuring. And let word spread to every pack under my rule. The Alpha King has found his mate. We will be bonded formally at the next full moon, and all are expected to attend and show respect. As the council began to disperse, some looking relieved, others resentful, Elena approached them with a grim expression. That went better than expected, she said quietly. Though you've made enemies today. I made enemies the day I took the crown, Kale replied. A few more won't change anything. Actually, Elena said, pulling out her phone, it might. I've been getting reports from the Eastern Territories. Other alphas are concerned about the human mate situation. Some are calling for a gathering of the Council of Alphas. Kale's jaw tightened. Let them call it. They'll get the same answer. What's the Council of Alphas? Alara asked, though dread was already pooling in her stomach. Elena met her eyes with sympathy. It's the only body that can challenge or remove an Alpha King from power. And they just demanded a formal hearing regarding your bond. The triumph of the declaration suddenly felt hollow. They'd won the battle, but the war was just beginning. Kale pulled her closer, as if sensing her fear. Whatever comes, we face it together. Alara looked up at him, this impossible man who'd upended her entire world, and made a choice. Together, she agreed, even if together meant facing down the most powerful wolves in existence.